I'm Liz Pope, and today I'm talking about 10% time, the pros and cons. And thank you very much for coming along and listening to me speak today. Now, I was double checking the programme yesterday and noticed what my talk was called, 10% time, the pros and cons, which was interesting to me because was what I'd put on my first slide up until last night when I changed it was this, the pros and cons of 10% time. Now, it's not really much different, but it did get me thinking is, why back when I put my speaker submission in, maybe I wasn't really certain if there were pros and cons? Was that the question? But I've decided now, I've made up my mind, and I am going to share with you today definitely the pros, but not so many cons, but challenges instead. So what are the challenges of 10% time? I'll also be talking about my experience with it, and offer you some advice on if you're lucky enough now or in the future to have 10% time, how to make the most of it for you and for your teams. So what is 10% time? Well, there's not really a standard definition, as because I'll go on to talk about lots of different companies do it in different ways. But I think of it really as research and development for everyone, or for a larger selection of people rather than having a research and development team. And also learning and development. And the simplest definition I can really give to you for it is an opportunity for the team to spend 10% of their time working on something different. So not project work, not sprint work, not client work, not something that they've been told to do, something different. Now, Google is the obvious place to start when talking about 10% time, as you'll probably know, they had their 20% time. Now, if you believe some reports, that no longer exists, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Now, 20% time equates to about 1 day a week spent doing something different. And Larry Page and Sergey Brin said back in 2004 that we encourage our employees, in addition to their regular projects, to spend 20% of their time working on what they think will most benefit Google. This empowers them to be more creative and innovative. Many of our significant advances have happened in this manner. And the significant advances are supposedly things like Gmail, Google News, and AdSense. These are things that have come out of Google's 20% time. Not really a bad track record. And Google aren't the only ones using something like 20% time. Some of the other big players have followed suit, notably Facebook in the form of hackathons. I don't know if anyone saw that they were Facebook live streaming their most recent one. Atlassian have Ship It, which they describe as like 20% time but on steroids, and that's for a sort of 24-hour period once a quarter. LinkedIn have Incubator, and this is where their employees can pitch to senior staff any idea that they like, get a team together, and if it gets accepted, they'll get something up to 3 months to work on it. And then Basecamp I want to give a mention to as well. They tried something called Project Month, where everyone in the business down tools, stop doing real work, if you like, for that month, and similar, they pitched in, they got people to come and support on the projects. What about my experience? Why am I standing here today talking to you about 10% time? Well, the company I work for is called Holiday Extras, and we have something called Project Lounge. Once a fortnight on a Friday, our delivery, our engineering team, not the entire business, stops doing their sprint work and does whatever they want. Our definition is that Project Lounge is a day where you choose what you want to work on. The only parameters are that it will either support you in your development or that it will benefit the business, either now or in the future. And our team choose to spend that time in lots of different ways. So some very much using it for innovation, new features they want to implement on our website or new designs they want to bring in. Others will use the time to fix bugs that have been annoying them, or making improvements to our builds, or adding more automation to the things that we do, or making speed improvements. Some people choose to work collaboratively, and others do more individual work. The team will often run workshops, sharing their knowledge with others in the team, or some will just sort of, do more individual learning, headphones on, online courses, reading, catching up, reading blogs, finding out about the latest tech. So there's really like a variety of things that go on in Project Lounge. And it's not just the sort of engineers that do it as well. Our testers, Scrum Masters, product owners take part too. Scrum Masters hold a coaching circle. Our testers do mob testing and look into things like security testing. Before we had Project Lounge, we tried a few different forms of 10% time. So back in about 2011, we had Hack Day. And we thought it was cool to all come in wearing hats on Hack Day. I was going to show you a picture, but it's a bit too embarrassing. I might tweet it later. It was a similar concept. It was one day a fortnight. The difference, though, really was that rather than being able to work on absolutely anything, we wanted to see stuff going into production. So sort of, our code base wasn't in the same place that it is now, so things like speed improvements weren't going to be as easy to come through. We still didn't even really have version control in, so improving builds wasn't exactly going to be something that we could do as a one-day job. And therefore, after a few months, things kind of died out, people stopped doing it, they went back to doing normal work on a Friday. And in its place, we put in more like a request a hack, almost. So if you had an idea that you were going to need a few days on, you'd put in a request for it, similar to what I was saying about LinkedIn's version, and you'd get given a series of days to work on it. The most successful thing that came out of that was a mobile app. It's a holiday countdown app, very simple concept. You put in your destination, you put in when you're going, and it counts down to it, and you can share it on Facebook and Twitter and brag to your friends about where you're going. And then one of the team came up with the idea after they saw the really poor quality app that their girlfriend was using to count down to their holiday. And he thought, well, we can build something much better. And as our companies in the travel industry, it made sense. So he got together a couple of other engineers, a designer, a tester. They put a short pitch together and were given a week. We locked them in a room, didn't disturb them, gave them plenty of coffee. And by the end of it, they came out and they'd submitted the first version of this app to both the Apple and Android stores. And 2 years on, we've had nearly 700,000 downloads of this app, and it's being worked on regularly by one of our teams, so it's a real success story of our 10% time. However, on the whole, we found that our pitching and idea approach didn't really work. It was too much of a barrier to entry. Some of the people that knew they had a great idea, so a mobile app is exciting, people are going to be interested in it. But some of the other things people weren't quite as confident about going and pitching an idea for, so we found that, again, this sort of died out over time. So in January of last year, we implemented Project Lounge. Our sister company had been running it in their dev team for a couple of years, so we could take learnings from them and implement it quite quickly. We've already seen loads of positives come out of it. So, what are the pros of 10% time? Individual development. When you give people dedicated time put aside to do whatever they want, they're going to improve themselves. They're going to work on things that help improve them. Now, some will choose an area that they're already an expert in and just become more of an expert, add skills in that area. Others will pick something they know nothing about. So, they might choose to work on one of your systems that uses a different programming language or a different framework or whatever, and then they'll learn about it. They'll pair program with someone that knows about it and they'll learn more. Or whether they're doing online learning or attending a workshop with somebody else. These are all things that are going to upskill the people that you work with, and that's only going to benefit you as a business. And also, as a business, you're investing in the individuals with that time, so they're going to obviously think that's a great thing. And you've got innovation. So 10% time gives everyone the opportunity to innovate, not just those who are in the sort of more innovative in general roles like product owners and maybe some of the business stakeholders. So anyone can be the person to come up with a new idea. And an increase in innovation can obviously give you a bit of a competitive edge. So the mobile app I mentioned, those 700,000 downloads, very few of them were already our customers. So that's a whole new market that's been opened up to us, and it wouldn't have happened if someone hadn't have come up with that idea in 10% time. Something else that people have been working on in Project Lounge recently is accessibility. Our website isn't very accessible to people with disabilities. So someone's got hold of a screen reader, and we've been making improvements to the website to do that. And that's something that's unlikely to have been prioritised over other work. If you're doing research and learning and development, you're often going to find new, better and more efficient ways of working. So whether it's things like fixing builds, improving the developer experience, automation. And it doesn't just have to be technical efficiencies and improvements either. Like I said, our Scrum Masters get together regularly and have coaching sessions, and they can, come up with ways from that in order to help the team work better together. 10% time is an opportunity for people to collaborate with people they may not normally. Our team was, when I first joined it about 5-6 years ago, only about 20 people, and now there's 100. And not everyone's going to get the opportunity to work with everyone. We've got about 12 small Scrum teams within that 100 people. And although we move people around on a fairly regular basis, some people may never ever work together. So, this gives someone in one team the opportunity to work with someone else that they may have not known about. And it improves communications between the different streams of work and breaks down silos. One of our team described our Project Lounge spot on the other day. They said it's a cross-team collaboration day. 10% time encourages people to be more self-organising as well. So there's no sort of our normal stand-ups on our Friday, but the team hold their own one. No one's facilitating that. No one's telling them they've got to. They've chosen to do it. They found that it's useful. They'll also do their own planning, clear their own blockers if they've got problems. All of these things helping the team become more self-organised. They've even brought in a sort of show and tell session towards the end of the day so they can share their learnings. We have a twice yearly engagement survey at work. Some of you may have a similar thing. And a question came up where we didn't get the greatest results, and I was drilling into it with the team, and the question was around, do you feel you can build a career here? And so I spoke to them about, what's important to them when it comes to having a career. And one was reward, so pay. Another was recognition, whether that be through job title or peer recognition or praise or whatever it might be. And the third thing that contributed towards this was choice in their work, getting to work on things that excite them. Now, as a business, we always strive to put people in teams that are going to excite them, that is going to play to their skill strength or help them improve in an area that they're interested in. But that's not always possible. Not all teams are as exciting as other teams. We are going to have some teams that are working on legacy code, not on the cutting edge stuff. Some people that do more operational tasks rather than, developing a new mobile app or something. So what Project Lounge, 10% time in general gives you the opportunity to do is allow people at least one day a fortnight to pick whatever they want to work on, and that's only going to help with their engagement. It's fun. It's good for attraction as well. So as well as keeping your current team members engaged, it helps attract new ones. We list Project Lounge 10% time on our website, on our career site, and often at telephone interviews for the very first stage, people will ask me, what's this 10% thing? Is it really true that one day a fortnight you can do whatever you want? I'm like, oh yeah, are you sure? Yes, absolutely, I promise, it's not a lie. You can see how excited they are by the concept of it, and and I'll often ask then at interview, well, you've obviously heard about our 10% time, what would you do with that time? And if anyone in here has been recruiting engineers in the last year or two, it's a really tough market out there, so you need something to set you apart. There are more engineering jobs than there are engineers, I think. So if you want to attract the best employees, then you need something to help you stand out. And we're based down in Kent in the southeast, and we're not that far from London, so people can quite easily jump on the high-speed train and go into London and possibly earn close to double the money that they can in Kent. So having a culture which encourages learning, collaboration and innovation is a really important way of attracting people to you. There are some things that money can't buy. And retainment is important as well. So, as I said, it's a tough market out there for recruiting. You don't want to have to be recruiting extra people because your team are leaving. Especially when your inbox is full every week on LinkedIn with recruiters tapping you up, saying, "Oh, go on, you can earn more money here, and there's something more exciting over there." So it's another thing that just helps keep your team happy, keep them engaged, and keep them wanting to work with you. Of course, some level of turnover is expected in any business, but having something like 10% time is only going to help reduce that. Another pro is bug fixing. You would not believe how many people, when they're told you can work on absolutely anything, choose to fix bugs. I think it's something to do with feeling empowered that you've seen this thing and it's been irritating you for so long and it never gets prioritised. Every sprint planning, it never quite makes a sprint and it sits there and everyone wants it to be done and you know it's going to help your customers, but it's not going to make the money or whatever it might be. So you get to your 10% time. Right, that's the bug I'm going to fix. And then I'm going to do that one and then I'm going to do that one. And similarly, tech debt. Now, I believe as a team we need to get better at tackling our tech debt. I think every team does, don't they? And you shouldn't rely on something like 10% time to deal with it. But again, the fact that some of our team choose to use 10% time to tackle it is a great thing. We had a team of about 5 or 6 people in our last project lounge who were, as they put it, giving one of our systems some love. And that involved going through, making sure versions were up to date, fixing small bugs, removing unneeded and duplicated code, tidying up some of the tech debt that we'd put GitHub issues in 4 months ago and no one had got round to doing. So to summarise, there's an awful lot of pros, and the ones I've mentioned probably doesn't even come close to being all of them. I could have probably stood here for the entire 45 minutes and talked to you about the great stuff that's come out of Project Lounge and 10% time in general. But for me, the biggest pro is the engagement and how it makes the team feel. And here's a quote of something that someone in my team said to me last week, and I promise you I didn't put these words into their mouth. We're having a general conversation, and I thought, this is wonderful. I'm going to put this straight in my talk. So now I've had the time, I don't know how I ever cope without it. It's a chance to catch up, keep up to date, and innovate. Oh, sorry. But on to the more interesting bit. No one wants to hear about the good stuff, right? You want to know where we went wrong and how we messed up and how we fixed it. Now, as I said, I wasn't sure whether they were cons or challenges, so I am going to go with challenges because there are so many pros to 10% time, and there's not many cons that sort of automatically flip the other way, if you know what I mean. But there are challenges to get it up and running properly and to getting the most from it. Do you ever have a chat with your partner one day and they say to you, "What do you want for dinner? You can have anything." And you think, oh, God. And you say, oh, I don't know, you pick. And other than that, just really irritating them, The thing is if my boyfriend texts me and said, do you want curry or do you want fish and chips? I say, oh, yeah, I want curry. But when he says you can have anything, it's like, well, I don't know what I want then. And it's because people are used to having parameters, they're used to having, things that they're working within. They might have a list of work and they know they've got to pick one of those pieces of work. They might have a feature that needs to be implemented. It's up to them how they implement it, but they're still being fed some of it. So I think people aren't used to innovating so much and coming up with ideas on their own. Some will be more than others. So it's quite natural, I suppose, that when you offer people a completely blank piece of paper, they don't know what to do. The other side of this is that there's too many things to work on. So some of the team have a billion different ideas and they just can't decide. So many ideas. How can they possibly pick just one? And what this often leads to is no end product. So they end up starting 10 things over the course of 10 weeks and never finishing any. They've got some code half written on their machine, uncommitted, that's going to fix a great bug, but they've just not got round to quite completing it. Or they've got a branch open with functionality towards a new feature, but again, it's not finished. And that means that it's not going to count for much. And when there's no end product, it's difficult to show the value of what you're doing. And measuring the value of 10% time is so hard. However value in your business is measured, whether it's in chargeable client hours, revenue, sales, conversion, or some other return on investment, you'll all be asked one way or another to measure the value. So how do you measure the value of 10% time? Because some days not a lot will be achieved. In fact, you might have a complete, throw it away and start again day, and that's okay, these things will happen. But other things, will be more of a slow burn. It might be something that has a time saving, so over the course of the month doesn't make much difference, but over the course of the year it could save your team hours and hours. And if you can't measure the value and you can't show that value, then it does lead to others not understanding. And others can mean anyone, so rest of the business or senior management. In our team, we're the only ones doing 10% time, the rest of the business aren't. So the original concept of Google's 20% time is that every Google employee would do it. But then I think where some other companies have implemented it, it's been more that it's just the engineering teams, and that's what we're stuck in. So then others don't understand what we're doing. They'll come and ask us to do other things during our 10% time. We'll have to say no. And that can lead to a bit of bad feeling. I'm sure some think that it's every other Friday is a dev team's DOS day. Cancellation. So that is a challenge of 10% time. If people don't understand it, if you can't show the value, it means that it's going to be at risk of getting cancelled. If you've got a tough few months trading or something, it's going to be the first thing that goes. Now, luckily, I've not really had to cancel any. We've cancelled the odd session if something's really been going on. We've hijacked a few for other things. We've found some other ways around it. So we've made it trading focused. So rather than asking the team to work on things that benefit their development or the business now or in the future, we're saying work on things that benefit the business now. What's going to make a difference in the next 6 weeks? And that's a way of sort of showing a better value immediately. Another risk of it is people taking the time for granted. Now, I don't mean using it as a DOS day and sitting around doing nothing, just playing pool and grabbing coffee. But will someone really use it effectively? If you get used to having a day a fortnight, do you really use that day the best that you could? If you only had one day a year, you would come into work for 9 o'clock on the dot and you probably wouldn't leave till 7:30 because you'd be so engrossed in what you were doing. You'd have the shortest lunch, you'd have 2 coffee breaks and that would be it. But when you start saying to people, well, you get this every other week, and they're like, oh, well, I'll take a slightly longer lunch and I'll go and see blah-de-blah from sales and have a chat with them, and I'll go and do this and I'll go and do that. And you end up not making the most of the time, not pushing yourself. And I think sometimes if you get used to having something like 10% time, you forget how unusual and kind of how lucky you are to have it, and therefore you don't use the time as effectively. Testers can't do it. And you could replace testers with anyone that doesn't, his core role isn't focused around writing code. Now, this is bullshit, actually, and I'll come on to that in a bit. And it's not such a problem as time goes on. There are absolutely things that testers and Scrum Masters and product owners and other people can do in 10% time, but it's not obvious because the things that we talk about are hacking and deploying and putting code in production and all the rest of it. So, and that mindset is damaging to the entire concept of 10% time if people sat there like, well, I can't do it because, I'm only a tester. Guilt is a real challenge of 10% time. People often feel guilty about not doing normal work, especially if you're up against it for a deadline, or as I would say, you're the only department in the business that are doing it. But it works both ways as well. The business will feel guilty about asking you to do something on your 10% day. So if there is a deadline, they'll feel guilty about saying, well, can you stop doing this thing that isn't maybe as urgent and do this thing that is urgent? And you end up with stuff like this going out on Slack. So, sort of apologetic, sort of pussyfooting around and saying, please, can somebody help me? There's this thing and kind of needs doing, and I know it's 10% time, and please will someone do it? Now, what usually happens here is that one of our engineers who already knows about the issue or that part of the code base will jump in, do it quickly, and then get back on with their chosen task. And they'll be happy because they'll be pleased that they've helped somebody out. But the challenge is, how do you determine when you should and shouldn't do this? When to push back and when to get on with it? When is it actually urgent and it can't wait until Monday? And when is someone, a stakeholder or someone, just trying their luck? And really, this work should be in their sprint. Getting buy-in is a big challenge as well. And this is where you can sometimes send mixed messages to the team. So you've got an idea and you want to work on it over the course of a couple of weeks to get it live. Now, it kind of contradicts something in somebody else's roadmap. or is going to play havoc with some split tests that somebody else has got going on, or it's something that's whatever. But do you take the idea as a drawn wireframe to the person that is going you need to get buy-in from at the beginning, and say, here, look at this, and they'll be like, yeah, no, sorry, that's not on my roadmap. If you do it, then it's going to get in the way, so you're not going to be able to put it live. Or do you spend time, a couple of weeks, building the prototype out, getting it working, and then putting it in front of them and maybe wowing them a bit more? There's a risk both sides. One, that it never gets off the ground, but two, that if you do take it to them as a working prototype and they still don't want it, and they're still going to block you from putting it live, that then you've wasted a couple of weeks. Now, there will be things that you've learned, of course, but you are then sending mixed messages to your team. You're saying you can use this time to work on whatever you want that you feel is going to drive the business forward. Oh yeah, but not that thing, and not that thing. Oh, and not if you get in the way of that person. Oh, and not if you're going to stop that split test. Oh, and you can't touch that area of the website because we've got a big plan for that. So getting buy-in is really important, and encouraging your team to get a clear message when they start as to what they can work on and what they can't. And one of the final challenges of 10% time is that 10% isn't enough. So maybe this is why people like LinkedIn have tried something where you get a longer period of time. We know very few things can be planned, engineered, tested and put into production in a single day. And often the ideas that teams come up with are going to span weeks and weeks. And, something that might have taken 5 days will take more than just 5 days of 10% time because you're constantly context switching. But if you increase it to 20% time, would that change? Or even 30% or 40% or 50% time? I think you're always going to come up against that challenge that people are always going to want more time. Most of the challenges I've mentioned so far are ones that I've seen firsthand, but it's not plain sailing for everyone else either. So reports in the last few years have claimed that Google's 20% time is no longer happening. And maybe only something like 10% of their employees are actually taking up the option. And a former employee of Google referred to it as more like 120% time, i.e. if you want to work on something extra, then you do it in your own time. Facebook hackathons, there's rumours that actually they're more for show these days, potentially while they're live streaming them. And how great really is Atlassian Ship It? So I said it's sort of 24 hours, but I did a little bit more research, and it seems that actually it's Thursday lunchtime to Friday afternoon, but everyone goes home. So it's more like 12 hours. So it's something like 2.5% time because it's once a quarter. Not really quite the 20% time on steroids that they claimed. And Basecamp that I mentioned as well, I struggled to find much mention of it past 2 blog posts about 2 years ago. So it's clear that lots of people are having challenges in implementing 20% time, or 10% time. So what's my point? I'm not trying to belittle any of these guys, and in fact, I admire all of them, and I've stolen bits of what they've done for my own team. But what I am trying to say is you've got to be realistic about it, and finding time to do these things is really hard. Finding time to be different and to innovate is challenging. So in summary, there's lots of challenges that come with 10% time. Supporting the team to make the most of it and not waste their time, helping others in the business to understand, and showing the value when sometimes you're not even sure what the value is yourself. But there are ways to get over these things, and some will be an ongoing battle, and there's no quick and easy fix, but others I do think you can solve more quickly. So how do we make the most of 10% time? Well, first of all, reduce the barrier to entry. So I said before that when you've got to pitch something, some people don't feel like they want to do it. They've got to then really put themselves out there. So all we have now is a spreadsheet, and we ask everyone to have filled it in by the Thursday afternoon with what they're planning on working on. If they're looking for volunteers, then put it down there and say you need 3 or 4 people to help you, and we know a little bit about what you're doing and what that person will get out of doing it, what the goal of it is. And as I mentioned before, we also have a sort of a show and tell towards the end of the day, but that's absolutely optional as well. So smallest barrier to entry as possible. Support those that are non-technical in the team, especially when you're first implementing it. So like I said, now our testers and our Scrum Masters and everyone else are empowered to go off and take ownership of their own learning and development, research and development time. But to start with, it can be a bit tough for them. So help put on workshops or things on testing techniques or coaching circles, or get them involved in the planning and prototyping stages of projects that other people are running. Or maybe this is an opportunity, if they're interested, to improve their technical knowledge. If people keep wanting to work alone during 10% time or don't want to join in at all, then sometimes I think that's a confidence issue. Why would anyone want me to help them? I don't know anything about that. They're working on this thing and it's going to be really cool, but I know nothing, so they won't want me to help. So I do like sort of sneaky things, and if I'm in a one-to-one with somebody and they mention that they're doing this cool project in Project Lounge and they're looking for some volunteers and they're struggling, and then the next day I speak to somebody else and they don't know what to do on Project Lounge this week, then I'll be like, oh, Blowbar's looking for some helpers. Or even better, I'll get that first person to directly approach them and say, I really want your help. And that helps people feel wanted and helps get them involved in the process. Reading a book is a good way to learn. Doing an online workshop is a good way to learn. But I believe that people can get so much more out of collaborating to learn. Pairing up, having a discussion, sharing ideas. I do sometimes wonder if we made a mistake with our Project Lounge time by mentioning your development as a major part of Project Lounge. I think it will always be a byproduct of it, but I think by putting it in there and saying your development or the business means that people have been quite singular in their approach to it. So they'll be looking at their performance and personal objectives and thinking, well, how can I work towards those this Friday? And it'll be headphones on, online workshop because I need to improve my JavaScript skills. Whereas actually what I'd like to see them doing, and we're trying to encourage more of now, is, well, if you want to improve your JavaScript skills, sure, do an online workshop, but go and sit with our best JavaScript developer. He's doing X today. Go and pair up with him. You're going to learn way more. So things like having a stand-up or having a doc where everyone's writing things down can help them see what other things are going on. And then just sometimes a little push in the right direction. So we've been doing it recently where if someone says they're working on their own, we say, well, oh, here, you could pair up with this person. And just sort of a bit of suggestion, not forcing them, but just helping them realise that personal and performance objectives can be worked together as a group, not just on your own. So again, people that don't want to do it. The key thing here is understanding them. Why? Why does someone not want to use this time? To most of us, it's probably like, oh my God, why wouldn't you want to use this time? It's amazing. But that's why it's so important to understand why someone doesn't want to use it. Maybe it's a one-off. Maybe this week they've got no inspiration and actually they're quite enjoying their sprint work, so they just want to crack on with that. In which case I'd just say, leave them to it, it's their choice. If it keeps going a few weeks, they keep not joining in, then I'd have a bit more of a chat, probe a bit more, try and get to the bottom of it. Are they under pressure from a stakeholder? Is there someone that making feel them a little bit guilty about it? Are they new to the business? Do they not understand the concept? Or use some of the techniques that I've said about before, get someone to directly approach them and say, I really, really need your help on this. Your skills are what I need. You're the person. You're the guy. Come get in my team. I need you this Friday. And maybe consider that if you're not getting the right answer, but one that you want to hear, then someone else can come at it from another angle, or maybe they just don't want to do it. Somebody said to me the other day that the most successful implementations they've seen of 10% time is when the entire business does it. Now, this isn't something I can speak from experience from. As I said already, it's just our team that's doing it at the business I work for. But if you are able to have your entire company, then it's far more likely to be successful for the reason that they will understand the value. So I think it's up to all of us, if you've got something like 10% time, to make the value obvious, or at least as obvious as you can. Celebrate the successes of your 10% time. and over-celebrate, if you like, really big it up. And don't just sweep the bad days under the carpet, because you can pull learnings from them all. Now, this probably means, this is where probably an overhead comes in for some of the managers in the team, because if you also want to keep the barrier for entry low, then you can't be asking everyone for return on investment when they're filling in your spreadsheet as to what they're doing. And actually, this is something that at the moment I'm crap at, and it's like on my list of things to get better at. I'm trying to work with the team to find better ways of showing off what they're doing without getting the business too involved early on in the things. So I'm actually looking for ideas on how to do this better. So if anyone has got any, I really appreciate it. And as I improve this over the next few months, I'll be tweeting about it as well. So yeah, I think make the value as obvious as you can to protect the time that you've been given. And balance the business and individual need. So yeah, it is frustrating when someone has to stop 10% time to work on some normal work, but it's give and take. But as I said in the previous section, it's difficult to know when do you push back. And again, maybe this is something where your engineers and testers need some support on pushing back on it. And you can have a chat with a product owner or a stakeholder and say, well, why is it so important? What's the risk if we don't do this today? And sometimes if you just sort of ask that question, they'll then back down a little bit and go, no, I was only trying my luck. They'd never admit it, but it can wait till Monday. And if they don't, then you know that it is really important and you should down tools and help with it. I've been on both sides of it. I've been on the side of trying to convince a product owner that what they're asking for isn't that important and it can wait till Monday, and also convincing an engineer that what's being asked for is really important and it can't wait till Monday. So it's all about compromise. And by sometimes giving up a little bit of your 10% time to help the business, you are in fact protecting that 10% time, because no one's then going to go moaning to senior management that the engineering team are being difficult. Be honest with the team. If you have to cancel, tell them why. If you had to adapt to more short-term goals, like I was talking about earlier, then tell them why. Be really clear. Again, another mistake I've made with this is over the summer we've switched to have a more short-term focus. I emailed the team and said, oh yeah, Project Lounge this week, we're going to do a trading focus. You remember when we last did one of them? Okay, see you later. And then the next week, oh yeah, Project Lounge this week, we're going to be doing a trading focus, probably going to be like this for a while. And actually what I should have done is manage the expectations at the beginning, because I'd set people up wrong. They thought that for 1 week they were going to do this trading focus and they were going to be able to go back to doing things that they've been doing before. And actually then they were more disappointed when the following fortnight I told them again it's still trading focused. And I could have saved myself a lot of hassle and had better communications with the team by being upfront at the beginning. And maybe it was upfront by saying, I'm not sure how long this is going to go on for. So manage people's expectations. This allows them to get the most from the time you're giving them. And in the end, it's up to them to do the rest. It's up to them to make the most of the time. So, in summary, it's a risk. 10% time, 20% time, hackathons, whatever you might call them, they are a risk. Facebook said of their hackathons, they serve as a foundation for some great and not so great ideas. Yes, Google got Gmail out of 20% time, but how many hours do you think somebody else spent drawing away on something that never saw the light of day? So yeah, maybe you're not going to have a Gmail-style breakthrough, but maybe you will. And I think it's absolutely worth it to give it a try. The benefits absolutely outweigh the risk. The pros outweigh the challenges. So take the pros, embrace the challenges, and go back to work and get yourself some 10% time. But one final thing, I've been thinking about this long and hard, but I do think it's okay if someone doesn't want to take part. Yes, you absolutely want to understand why they don't want to take part, and if there's barriers in the way to break them down and get them involved. But ultimately, it is their decision. And if we start forcing people into doing 10% time, then doesn't that counteract the whole point of 10% time? Thank you.